Welcome to KUDOS AM, a podcast exploring the future and impact of design innovation as they relate to art, technology, and business. I'm your host, John Kudos, and tonight I am actually going to chat with another powerhouse creative to hopefully gain some insights on your success. Zipeng Zhu, or Zhu Zipeng, is a Chinese-born designer, art director, illustrator, and animator in New York City. He is a queer immigrant artist who wants to make every day a razzle-dazzle musical. Zipeng's bold, colorful, and playful body of work resonates with so many, leading him to an outstanding list of clients from Coca-Cola, Microsoft, Twitter, Netflix, the New York Times, the New Yorker, CNN, MTV, and Samsung. He was one of the Art Directors Club Young Guns 13 winners and has been recognized as Print Magazine's new visual artist and the One Show Young Ones. Zipeng, welcome to the AMPM podcast.
Thank you for having me. Well, I guess you should also thank me for having you in my house. But
oh my God, I was going to do that next, but yeah. So before we start, what's up with the jazzy living room here?
I am simply not interested in minimalism or just the art of Morricone or whatever she's about. Don't care for it. So I want to do the exact opposite, to create a life of chaos.
A life of chaos. This is hardly chaos. I see lots of colors though.
Yeah, I mean, this is also like, me furiously cleaning for 2 hours. So, it's definitely chaotic in energy, but, I still have to live here,
Yeah. And have you always been in New York City?
No, I was born and raised in China. I'm from a town called Shenzhen, which is right next to Hong Kong. It's the fourth largest city, the Silicon Valley, but also looks like Miami for some reason.
Wow.
Yeah, so I have the Miami personality, but, technically it's the tech town where I'm from. And then I have decided to come to the States, study graphic design almost exactly 15 years ago. And I have been in New York ever since.
Did you visit any other cities in the States?
No.
This is it?
I just
knew it?
Well, I knew it in the sense that I was between Savannah, Georgia, and New York City, and I was watching Gossip Girl like crazy, like any other queer person growing up at the time. All I want is to be in the same city that Blair was in. So I decided to move to New York.
We all have our motivations. That's pretty awesome.
I mean, that turned into a whole career. That's not a very bad gamble, don't you think?
Totally. So you came here to study. Which school did you go to?
I went to School of Visual Arts on 23rd Street.
And then why School of Visual Arts? Did you look at other schools?
The whole journey of me coming to New York, to SVA, was completely out of random because SVA was not my dream school. My dream school actually rejected me. Well, I mean, who's laughing now? So, it's their loss. Don't have me as an alumni, so sucks to be them. And therefore, I was left with the two options that gave me offer, which is Savannah and New York. Yeah. And between SCAD and SVA, like I said, all I want is to be Blair. So I just took a gamble. I mean, don't get me wrong, I got into a few very intense fights with my parents about the price of the tuition and the city that I want to live in.
Yeah.
Also, I basically took a drastic 180 because I was supposed to study biochemistry, and then I just changed it 3 or 4 months before I have to decide my major.
I can't even imagine from biochemistry to design. And I mean, I'm also coming from an Asian family, and it was really hard to convince my parents. I don't think they even knew what I was doing in the design school.
My life is the opposite because my dad was a professionally trained painter and then turned graphic designer unsuccessfully. So he actually, I think, learned from the hard way why he wouldn't want this for his
so
kid.
he's like, you don't want to do.
No, he's like that is like when I was growing up, I don't quite remember if this is exactly true, but I remember I'm not allowed to touch the art books. I can read anything else in the library, but like the art stuff, it's like not forbidden, but it's like highly not recommended. They're like, why are you looking at this?
Yeah.
And
so
then,
you basically force your way to the States somehow, or
well, actually, my gateway drugs to graphic design was actually manga. So I was reading so much manga, so I really want to become like a manga artist to just draw, and I can't draw. Given the fact that my dad is a professional painter, I have no talent in drawing at all whatsoever. But that left me with so much skills in Photoshop. I am so good at Photoshop that basically led me into photoshopping my friends' photos, and then they're like, oh, but like, can I turn it into like a poster? And then that sort of like slowly weave my way into graphic design. And then I remember, and at that time I haven't taken any art classes, and I just decided to take one just for fun. And my amazing high school art teacher, Cedric, he was like, you're really good at this. You should consider study this as a major, so you can make money out of it. I was like, people make money out of this? Okay. I mean, it's kind of true or not true, like to make money out of designing posters nowadays. But
right.
At that time, 15 years ago, I was like, oh, cool. That sounds great. Sign me up.
Now, have you always been this way in terms of your design expressions?
No, because I remember right before I moved to America, my mom said to me, just try to blend in. I mean, she knows that I can't do that, but she just said, try to blend in, because in China, we have a phrase that the gun is going to shoot the bird that stuck their head out. So if you are to stand out, like you'll be the number one criticized figure.
Wow.
So my freshman year, at the time I had, fun enough, I went to international high school, so we all have English names. So like all my Chinese friends actually call me my English name that I no longer use, that I have.
So you're not going to share that?
So I had an English name, and then every single time I introduced myself, they're like, why would you call yourself that? And I have to spend 2 minutes to just give them the backstory of my English name. That is very normal, by the way. Like I have a very normal English name, and then people just somehow cannot compute. So I just decided to, take a deeper look at the meaning of my Chinese name. And Zipeng means an exuberant child. So, which I think is a very accurate depiction of who I am as a person. I am kind of a grown man, like a big child in disguise as a grown man, I think. And therefore, a lot of things in my house, it's basically look like daycare furnitures, basically, and which I'm fine with. That being said, I decided to go back to the name that my parents gave me because it's a wonderful name, and it gave me something to live up to every single day. And I felt like ever since that is just no going back afterwards.
So when you were in SVA, right? You said you were inspired by manga in the beginning, but then can you talk about your journey and how you kind of found your aesthetics?
Right. So the 29 and the 2010 in New York City, for me, is just lots of gray, navy, and black jackets, because I'm from the tropical side. So the second I got here is, why is everything so cold? Like at that time, prior, like, less impact from the global warming. It was like so cold, even in the fall. So I just remember, like, I went to like H&M or Top Man or whatever shop at that time, just get so many cold winter jackets that can help me to survive the brutal, snows that we have. And I just remember walking like on the street and then seeing everyone is basically dressed the same. And at the time, my work was also like very much like black and white, and then with like maybe a hint of red if I feel so bold, But then I just had a moment. I realized that I was very lucky and I'm very grateful that I have amazing teachers that are legends in the industry. Paula Scher, Karen Goldberg, Gail Anderson, Brian Collins, Debbie Millman, you name them. But at that time, I think as a student, you try to learn from the masters, right? So I couldn't help but to drawn to some of the iconic or timeless design that is just black and white and maybe with a hint of red, because you can't go wrong with that.
Right. Yeah.
Probably ever. So my work was very much like that. But then I realized everyone sitting next to me is doing the same thing. So I had a moment. I was like, so we are just kind of currently competing who's doing the best impression of the master right now, which I don't really think it's what the design degree is for, to be, like, if it's design, if it's creativity, like, shouldn't we try to create instead of mimic? And I also had the wonderful pleasure to take Debbie Millman as one of my professor. And then at that time, the title of her class, it's called Differentiate or Die.
Love it.
Colon, how to get a job after you graduate. So in that class, we learned how to differentiate so we are not going to die. But during that class, I was able to discover the amazing musical Chicago. And in the musical, there's a song called Razzle-Dazzle by Rich Gere. And that phrase just like spoke to me because one, it has ZZ in the word because, my initials are ZZ, which is like always the last person, but it's like, you don't really have initials like ZZ that often as people. So I saw razzle-dazzle, and then I was looking into the dictionary, and then something about the word dazzle really captured sort of, I think, my essence, even though razzle means absolutely nothing at all. Without, like, razzle does not mean anything. And then with that, I decided to sort of just embrace the life of being dazzling. And then in that class with Debbie, I wrote my mission statement, which is I want to make every day a razzle-dazzle musical. And that sort of, once I figured out that, everything became clear because my decision is this dazzle enough? Is this, shiny, bold, exciting, exuberant enough? Like, my name means an exuberant child. Like, if my work does not deliver exuberance, what's the point? Like, I am not really interested in coming to a difficult country, went to a shockingly difficult art school. I did not know what I signed up for, what I was signed up for when I applied to SVA, and Lord, was it tough. I felt like I was in the Hunger Games every single day, trying to survive. And so with that hardship, sort of made me felt like, oh, maybe I should just take more initiatives and then just do the work that I think resonate with myself and my aesthetic a little bit more. Like, I grew up in a tropical climate. Everything is bold, colorful, intense, and like so extreme. It's like, all the tropical fruits are crazy, not just the looks, but the taste and everything. So I want my work to resonate that. So that's the moment I basically ditched all of the quiet, beautiful, delicate serif behind and then go full nuts with color, pattern, and like very extra bold, super ultra black like typography as like the start of my career.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually amazing that you sort of discovered that, in school.
Yeah, I remember a classmate of mine said to me, he's like, damn, I bet a lot of people took a really long time for them to find this, and you just somehow figured. I was like, I don't know, man. I just don't want to make another boring poster anymore. Like, I can't make another. I just can't. Like, I have made, I don't know, 1,000 boring posters while I was at school.
Yeah.
Granted, I think they look great, but
Right.
what one more that I make, it's gonna contribute to the body of work that I want to create versus one less. There's none, But if I can create something that is true to what I believe in, then I can slowly build this world of me, of Z, that can sort of become like a universe almost.
Do you ever feel I guess the fear of, doing something that's different? Or maybe, I know you're talking about how it needs to stand out, right? The work needs to be different. Do you ever, even now, like when you're doing your work now, do you ever feel like, well, is it wrong or is it okay for me to do something like this?
Yeah, I remember I wasn't really, I think I was born really without that word in my dictionary, or maybe I was just too young and too stupid to understand what fear was. I didn't think much. Like, I'm not like super bright, so I just sort of like think of something and I make them, and then that's sort of like my running theme of life usually, until I got a very intense text message from a friend of mine. Basically, at that time, my website had really intense flashing graphics at you if you just land on it. And then he texted me. He's like, "Whoa, dude, I almost had a real seizure on my website. Like, you have to put out a warning before you do stuff like that." And I just, like, a little bit of me sort of, what's the word? I feel like I got hit really hard for that moment, because that was never my intention. And nor did I know. Like, I was just this clueless, ignorant person that just didn't think too much. And I thought this looked cool, therefore I put it out there. And I did not know the potential harm that it would cause for people. And that was sort of a awakening moment of just having me to re-examine what I do and what I put out, to sort of just double check with some people to make sure it's okay. Like, I make a lot of work that it's in response to what's happening in the world and what's happening, in our society. And sometimes they are touchy subjects, and sometimes they're taboo subjects. Sometimes they're very complicated things for a post to talk about, like for a graphic to talk about. But that's the only expression that I know, and that's the only way I know how to express what I'm feeling or what's going through my mind. Therefore, I make them, I put it out there. But from that, I learned to just talk to a few people before I do so, because I often, I think in my mind, it's sort of like, not exactly clickbait, but like, I want to, like, I dress like this. Clearly, I love attention, So, but sometimes I might get not clouded, but sometimes like my instinct is to go to the craziest phrase that I can come up with, or like the most extreme graphic that I can come up with. But then it's reflective of what was on my mind at the time. But I think, after learning that, talking to people, I can sort of find a more digestible way to let people get my message, but without me, giving them a seizure, for example.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I don't think I've ever thought of graphic design as a profession that could harm people physically.
It has certainly harmed the La La Land director. So,
okay.
That's graphic design.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking like architects, like you can't build a building a certain way, it may collapse, right? But it's funny. I mean, it's not funny. It's interesting to actually learn that, our work as graphic designers could have that kind of impact.
Sometimes.
Well, I mean, emotionally, maybe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about your process? Because I noticed, maybe, and millions of other people, when they look through your Instagram, there's a lot of reactive things, meaning you respond to what's happening at that moment, right? What do you do? Like when you do, how do you internalize, so like emotion and like turn that into design?
Right. I mean, okay, I'm glad that you defined the word process, because if you want to watch like my work process, it's like literally the world's most boring, like Twitch feed you can ever watch. No, because it's just, I mean, my interns here, she can testify.
Oh, yeah, we have a small audience.
Yeah, it's just me on a chair and then like crouching like this, and then I don't use mouse or like a big monitor. It's just my 13-inch tiny little MacBook, and then I'm just like do this and then some trackpad, and then that was it. Like I don't use pen or paper to sketch. Everything's done in my head before, and then I would say when I watch the news or like online or whatever, see something, hear something will pop into my head and say, oh, I think I can summarize this in something, whether it's typographic, whether it's illustrative. I don't really know, but like usually there's an image pop into my head, and then I will think about, oh, how can I make it the most clear possible? Because sometimes you have an image, but that image doesn't fully communicate what you want to say. So I will, in my head, sort of just work out, okay, that probably doesn't work in this, because I've been doing this for 15 years. Well, if you count the Chinese years, I've spent 20 years of my life doing this. So I sort of had some inkling or sixth sense of like what might or might not work. So in my head, I'll work out a lot of the ideas. Like, for example, I had an idea for the Paris Olympic. The iconic Olympic logo has 5 rings. Paris have 5 letters. How can I use the rings to design typography that resonates not only the Olympic rings, but also Paris? So in my head, I was working out all the possible letter form options, and then I had one. I was like, oh, okay, I got this. So I start to, design them. And then when I was doing that, I realized there are certain issues. And I don't really post too many variations or many, steps process, because I believe that it's a designer's job to make decisions on what's the possible solution to the problem. Therefore, I spend a lot of time actually, rather than making them, it's just choosing what's the best options. And then I felt I was kind of stuck. So I reached out to a wonderful friend, Jeremy Mickle, Mickle Type in LA. I was like, hey, Jeremy, like I have this idea. I think it's working for 4 out of the 5 letters. So how can we make the 5th letter work? And then this is a time when your amazing friends come in. You know, you have talented people. I mean, I'm very, very lucky to have amazing friend of mine that sometimes we have a group chat. I would just send it to the group chat and they would just solve it for me, which is great. But this time I have Jeremy. And then Jeremy said, oh, how about you flip the order of how you show the type? So then you can use the given space to, you know, tell the using the ascenders, descenders to sort of like the little legs and tails that the letters have to sort of figure out the rest. And that was the perfect suggestion. The second I hear that, I was like, that makes perfect sense. I knew exactly, and I did it. I put it out. And then that's sort of like the usual process. And then the reason it inspired me of doing that is I remember someone was interviewing Bill Maher. Like, you know, whatever you want to say about a guy, whatever. But he said, the question is like, you know, what makes you decide to become a political comedian? And then Bill Maher said, oh, the answer is easy because there's news every single day. And when the news come to you, the setup, it's already done. All you need to do is to come up with the punchline. So that sort of like unlocked something in me. You know, like I'm almost like a one-liner comic, but using graphic design as a tool to deliver the message. Because like if you look at most of my work, it's just one idea, like one thread. Like I'm not one of those like people who graduated from fancy Ivy League schools that can give you the studies, the historical references, and the breakdowns. Like I don't care about any of that. I think that is a waste of time. But that's what they want to do. That's their life. They can do whatever they want. But I don't want any of that. I want to make things that what's the word? That's like truly just came out of me in a way, if that makes sense. Like that's why I usually just wait till my brain to give me an image, and once there's an image, I'll make them.
Well, sometimes the most obvious solution is right there in front of you, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm not like don't get me wrong. It's not like I don't try options. Like I definitely try a bunch of things and see which one is the best. But I just don't think, you know, especially if I'm, you know, reacting to, you know, what's happening right in front of me. Like sometimes, you know, I don't know, I feel like maybe I have 3 hours, you know, within the time span of news before something else crazy happens. Then people move on to the next thing. I felt like my the lifespan of this creativity specifically is actually really short. So I have to, one, be able to work fast. Thank God I am. Like most things I make takes about 10 to 15 minutes to make.
No way. Really?
Yeah, but it's like it takes like an hour or two to think about them.
Right.
But once I make, like, you know, I usually know exactly what I want to make, so I can just make them really quick. But, you know, because it's the news or because it's like something that's so dire, like for example, like Stop Asian Hate, like, you know, after the tragic shooting of the nail salon in Atlanta, you know, I have to do something, you know? And I was very lucky. Lucky is not the right word. Sorry. I happened to be contacted by Times Square that they had similar thoughts. They want to put out a PSA, and, you know, I think the news broke out like the late night before, and then I think I got the assignment the next day around like noon, and I finished the work maybe at 2 or 3 p.m. like just like that. Like there's no revisions, and then just everything sent to print. And then
it's almost like you've been thinking about how to design this even before they contact you.
I was. So if you look at the actual final design, like there are 2 different phases, because one was a phrase that the Times Square want to put out, the PSA, and then there's another one that is something that I felt very dearly to. You should just go read them because I think both are great messages. But it's been on my mind, and then I just felt that it's really rare to feel useful as a graphic designer. I felt like I often feel like a lump of a couch potato, just like, squatting and doing some, silly haha thing on the internet. And when something that is so tragic happened to your community, I just felt like I have so much sadness and anger and just emotions that I can't process. And then making work is my way of coping. I mean, I have therapists, I promise, but like I also think this is my way of like working through a lot of my own issues. So I was very grateful that I was able to have this opportunity to really express how I feel towards my the community that I love.
So now there's a purpose, so I mean, it's not like your work doesn't have a purpose, but this just happens to serve a bigger community that you're in.
Right, because I don't know, I can say this about a lot of people, but when you become, I didn't came to America to become a content creator, that is, sorry, that sounds so sad. But
you're a really good content creator. I don't think you need to be ashamed of that.
No, I'm not ashamed of it. But I think, but content is different from just work, because I think the value of content is a very elusive concept. You could create something that brings a smile to someone's face, and that's enough for me. But sometimes it's like what you make, it's just turn into, I don't know, a couple hundred likes, and then that's it. And that, as a content creator, that sometimes you kind of can't separate the value of the work from simply numeric metrics, because otherwise, how do you define where you are, or how do you define if this is good or not? And probably you can't, but that was the closest and easier way for you to understand what's happening to what you have just made. But with that, often you just feel like, at least I feel like, me screaming into the void, which is the internet. Occasionally you hear a few people scream back, but that doesn't happen often. And not to mention how sometimes I feel like not creating real work was like a very hard thing for me to work through for a longest time. Because I, like, don't get me wrong, like, you probably see me posting all the time, but I have posted so much less now because I've been trying to figure out what that really meant for me. And then it's a like roller coaster on a daily basis. And when I have ideas, I will make them. But before, I'm the guy that makes one post a day. That's why I have like thousands of things on my Instagram, because I just can't stop. I just constantly have things I want to make, things I want to say. But then the pandemic really sort of changed a lot of that, because I was going through a breakup. My green card was rejected. I was, surviving a global pandemic while my people from my country, or people just my ethnicity, are being attacked, on the internet, in real life, everywhere we go. So I had so much going on in my life that I kind of can't make like a silly penis drawing on the internet anymore, even though that was like a big part of like my early career. Like, oh, he's that guy that draws like cute dicks. I was like, great, love that. I still love them. I'm very proud of making them, because if I don't make them, who else, you know? But then I just had a moment. It's like, how do I do that if I am not happy? You know, how do I make happy work if I am not feeling that? So that was sort of like a moment that changed how I approach what I make. It's that instead of becoming this internet jester, like, I don't want to use clown because I don't think but this, like, you know, internet person that try to just be fun. Like, maybe I can work through my problem with everyone else together. And that's sort of when my work sort of became more out vocal in a way. Like, you know, just it's more political. Like, I was so scared of posting anything political prior. Like, speaking of fear, that's what I was fearful for. To do anything remotely political might criticize my livelihood to stay in this country. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm sure a lot of people be like, you know, but this is what this country is for. I mean, I don't know if you have seen or read the news. Like, that's certainly not the case. Right. Therefore, me and my family has sacrificed so much for me to be here. And I have sacrificed so much for me to be here. I've said goodbye to every single person that I love back home to be here. I'm not going to let an Instagram post to take me down, you know? Therefore, I was so fearful to say anything towards the authority at the time. But then I had a moment, it's like, during 2020, it's if... like, the First Amendment was one of the few of, like, amendments I am able to exercise as an immigrant in this country. You know, I mean, definitely don't want guns, you know, like, so I'm going to use my, you know, expression as my, I don't want to use the word weapon, but I want to use your tool. My tool. Yeah. Thank you. And then I felt like that was the sort of the moments like, oh, then I'm going to express to the fullest. I mean, I need to do my best to understand what's happening with outside and within, like what I'm feeling. But meanwhile, to find the best visual expression and solution to carry that out. Yeah.
I mean, this resonates with me at so many levels as an immigrant as well, right? Are you a green card holder now?
Finally, yes.
Congratulations. Now, you know, I got my citizenship recently.
Congratulations.
But it took years for me to get there, right? And I think sometimes I feel that people don't understand what I've gone through to actually be in this position now where I can say I'm a citizen now.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the privilege of born in a, you know, very powerful country and to not to ever need to think about immigrating because everyone wants to immigrate to this country. Mm-hmm. And I think it is in some way understandable. I don't think it's okay, but I think it's understandable why they don't have the certain empathy for immigrants who are going through immigration troubles. How would they ever understand what that feels like if they don't ever need to experience that? Like, you know, right. I don't care how good news, TV, movie, songs can depict the feeling. No one can describe the amount of sadness when you got a call from your lawyer telling you that your green card got rejected a week before Thanksgiving. You know, like no one can feel that. Yeah. Yeah. Like only the immigrants can feel that for each other. Mm-hmm. And yeah, and I think, you know, I am very lucky that now I'm on the other side, that I had a green card, that I get to, you know, leave the country for the first time in, I don't know. Oh my God. 8 years. You haven't left for 8 years? here's the timeline of my very complicated visa situation. I got an O1 when I was working, and then my O1 got extended, which is great. But at the time, I thought I was ready to apply for a green card.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, but when you're applying for a green card, like you're strongly advised to not to leave the country.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't. My first one got rejected, which is 2018. And then I immediately have to get a new visa.
Mm-hmm.
And right after I got my visa, the pandemic happened. So that's, like just all of these time add up together. I just haven't been home for a very, very long time. And then this year, like this March was the first time I went home in, I think, 8 years. And I haven't seen my parents for 6 years. And during that time, my dad passed. Like, I didn't get to go home to say goodbye to him. It's like, there's so much difficulty as an immigrant. And then also I'm from China. Like, my visa only worked once. The one time I entered this country, and then one entry,
it's like a ticket to get in.
On my visa, it says one entry.
Oh.
So if I come in, my visa's done. So if I need to leave, I need to do it again. Who has the time and the luxury to wait for months for this to happen? Yeah. I can't do that. I can't afford to do that. Yeah. So I just never left. And then,
Sometimes I think about, the kind of pressure that the rules, the regulations put on immigrants. It's kind of impossible. And here, everyone's talking about immigrants as a part of a problem. Like, no way.
I mean, the people who think immigrants are the problem simply do not understand how it's the building blocks where the society is formed on. I think that immigrants has provided all of the essential care that this country needs. Like, so many people working at the restaurant industry, in the groceries, and in the delivery service, and in the car share service. Like, all of this. Without them, how can we, I can't even imagine the life that we're gonna have. And they are only, and there's what's the word? They're only a part of this larger immigrant community, not to mention the crazy talented, Nobel Prize winning, physicists or whatever that, moved here. But the people that immigrated here are just trying to have a better life for themselves or for their children. But then meanwhile, what they have provided to this country is just so unbelievably essential that I sometimes simply cannot understand why someone even have the balls to have that, thought.
Yeah.
But that's why I think, exposure and matters, because, the more people are talking about it, hopefully one day it will be more appreciated.
Yeah. So I think, in many ways, as immigrants, we have to soldier through so much, right, to just have an ordinary life here. And I'm saying this because sometimes, I feel like we have to be so excellent in what we do for people to actually pay attention.
Well, so my mom has said this super true but borderline depressing sentence to me. She's like, honey, if you want to stay in this country, you have to at least try to be better than all of the Americans. Otherwise, why would they want you here? And then I was like...
it's so true.
I was like, Mom, that is so intense of a sentence to say to your kid who's about to graduate from college. I'm barely good enough. Like my classmates were so talented. Like, I was very lucky to be blessed with a very talented class. But like, I'm certainly not the best. Like, I'm not even the top 10% when I was graduated from college. So I was like, okay, if this is what you think my life is, I think I should just start, like, get ready to, like, pack home. And then, like, thank God I got a drop off for, like, the day after I graduated. So, but in some way, it's true in the sense that that's how they, for us graphic designers or a lot of creative, you kind of have to apply for O1, which the O stands for outstanding, and how to define yourself as outstanding. And then for me, at that time, there's no 3-year OPT under BFA degree. So I only had 1 year. And immediately I have to transition into an O1. How do you become outstanding to some random officer sitting in like an office to deem that you are outstanding, that this country needs you within a year after graduation? Like, how do you do that? And in many ways, it's sort of like what you said, like some of the criteria are borderline, impossible. How are you going to have exhibitions as a graphic designer? How are you going to have publications? And how are you going to have awards? Granted, your student award does not count. How is that fair? How is that, how does that make sense? But you don't have a choice. That's the rule. If you want to be here, if you want to play the game, you're going to play with the rules. But I was very lucky that my first job, shout out to Stefan and Jessica, to give me this amazing career that I have right now. But without that job, I think my journey of getting a visa probably would be so much more harder. And like me, as someone who was very lucky to have a lot has done in the first few years of his career, still got rejected for a green card. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, if I don't get it, I guess this kind of sounds so cocky, but at the time it's like, if I don't get this with the portfolio that I submitted, with the reference letters, and with all of the awards, publication, all of the things that I have provided, I gave them 500 pages of evidence.
It's just insane.
And then they come back with RFE, which stands for requests for evidence. I'm like, what more do you want from me? I have checked every single thing out of your lists. Every single criteria. Who can do that? And they still asked for more, and then they still rejected me. So if this is the pathway for an immigrant, I just think for anyone thinks that we are the problem or we are bringing, like, it's not easy to be here. It's so hard. And the people who want to be here because they love this country so much, they're willing to go through all of these rings of fire just to be here. Why are we the problem?
It's insane when I think about that. Now, I want to go back to your beginnings and then also where you are now. And then, I'm seeing this constant evolution of Zipeng, right? Now, I think in SVA, you picked up a lot of skills, right? A lot of technical skills. Now, in your work now, I see motion as a big component of your work, right? And then I also see that at Dazzle Studio, your practice now, environment graphics, right? You're doing all kinds of stuff. It's like beyond graphic design, So I want to understand, like, what fuels this, like why, how do you continue to kind of reinvent yourself and like stay relevant all this time?
I remember when I was graduating, someone asked me what type of designer do I want to be? And then I said, graphic designer.
just graphic designer.
And then the person looked at me like an idiot. And he was like, no, I meant like, do you want to be editorial? Do you want to do branding? I was like, oh, I have to choose? I thought these are just graphic design. They're like, yeah, technically that's true, but if you want to do editorial, you need to go to publishing. If you want to do branding, you go to an agency or a studio. I was like, oh, okay. And then, I'm a Libra. Like, I'm not good at making decisions. I'm not good at picking options. So I was like, oh, fuck. Now I have to make this like tough choice. Mm-hmm. Thank God at that time I was just solely interested in branding. I was like, okay, I guess I can like narrow it down a little bit since this seems fun to me. But then I had the tremendous luck that my first and almost only internship was with the legendary polisher at Pentagram. And then my first and my last job was at Sagmeister and Walsh with the legendary Stefan Sagmeister and Jessica Walsh. All three of them don't really play by the rules of definitions. If you look at Paula with her body of work, especially the work for the public theater, it's like, yes, you can call that branding, but it's so much environmental work. So I was able to learn a lot when I was there interning. But then at Sagmeister and Walsh, like, definition, it's a stupid concept. Most of the client came with the open brief, So I was just, I guess, in some way very spoiled by thinking like I don't need to apply lots of the limitations to myself if there weren't any in the beginning, But then I think to answer your other question, like when it comes to environmental and motion graphics was out of pure, I don't want to say luck, but because I took one semester of motion and I dropped it because I think it was animation was just awful. After Effects, ugh, what a terrible application. Whoever designed that can just burn in hell. That's what I believed at that time. At that time. And I graduated. I started my first job and my last job. And I was the only one who can somewhat animate at the studio. So obviously I had to animate. And that sort of changed my perspective of animation a bit because I didn't have to animate something that wasn't like my animation that I did at the studio was facilitating the work that we were doing instead of just coming up with like a whole storyline, a storyboard out of nothing. Like, I'm not a cartoonist. Like, I'm not an animator. Like, my brain does not think like that. But I know what kind of story I want to tell if I want to show people a logo. That makes sense to me because this is helping my design work. So that became more pleasurable and more joyous for me to make. And then once that started, like, I started to have more fun, and then somehow it became my main source of expression now, which is crazy. And I can make an animation in 5 minutes if you need me to, like I can do it like that. Yeah. Like a lot of the things that you see I make, definitely not more than 20, like almost ever. Wow. But for environmental, it's sort of similar in the sense that one day I realized I think my work will look so much bigger and better, so much better when it's bigger. Because my works are often very simple, even though they're complex, but they're usually just one thing's repeating or one thing's being like, exaggerating. And I think the scale can change that impact. Like your screen is fun and all, but like it's this big. Right. But if it's this big, then that just sounds more awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just looking at your pillow here as you're talking about that, and I'm just imagining this covering the entire room. I think I want to be in that space.
Yeah, and then that's sort of like the kickstart of a lot of the mural work that I started to do afterwards, because I just realized, oh, if this looks good like this now, imagine it 20 times, 50 times bigger. And funny enough, this graphic actually was created for a mural first. For a show that I did in China. And then I was like, okay, that looked awesome. How can I just have this everywhere in my life? And then I just start to make gazillion things out of it.
Yeah. This is a product line?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can get them at razzle-dazzle.
Okay.
My store.
So so I guess I shouldn't even be asking, like, you somehow made that transition. You're like creating products now, you're selling them.
Well, that was out of necessity, because I had, when I first started the studio, there were, I think, about 4 months of the time we had no client. And then I have a project manager that I pay for at the time, and I have an intern that I pay for at the time. And I'm not going to sit and do nothing.
Right, yeah.
I was just like, we had a meeting. I was like, guys, we have no work. So how about we come up with some work for ourselves? And this sort of came out of that time, because I was like, okay, I guess we're just going to make stuff and then put it out there and see if people are interested. And then, I mean, granted, people love they're great pillows. Yeah. So, I mean, I was very lucky. And also, I'm so ADHD. Like, I can't just like sit here and do nothing. Like, even when I'm like procrastinating, doing nothing, like I'm definitely, TV is on, my computer is on, and my phone. Like I'm like, like I can't. I am rotten.
Amazingly rotten.
I'm just, I can't stop not functioning,
Yeah. All right. So I want to ask you one last question.
Yeah.
Which is, what's next?
I have 2-ish answers. In my personal life, I would love to figure out what this new life I have embarked, like, how can I, because before I lived in apartments, and now I have a house, and I've only lived in apartments, like.
This is a beautiful house, by the way.
Thank you so much.
I've been walking around and just admiring every detail.
It is truly, it has been a nightmare since day one. And I am very happy this is your impression, because, sometimes the roof leaks, sometimes this breaks. My basement got flooded with sewage. It's like, that is such a difficult thing for you to take on as someone who literally just thought getting this was a nightmare. And then now it's like so I'm trying to figure out how to find the balance to not only having a beautiful life in the house, but also make my house a beautiful representation of myself. And then, so that's on the personal level.
Yeah.
On the career level, I'm trying to figure out what is a potential career pivot into creating more art than just commerce design.
Oh, interesting.
And I don't know what that answer is, because, as I said, I can't draw. So I have to figure out something else for me to make physical things. I don't know what that really entails, but yeah, that's that. But I believe in the power of manifesting. I would love to design an airplane, like a graphic for an airplane.
God, yes.
Yes,
I would love to see an airplane covered by graphics.
Or any form of transportation. I'm not going to be greedy. Of course, airplane would be amazing, but if I can do a train, happy to do so. MTA, come on. And, if I can do a car, will happily do so. Even a bike. Like, I am not going to be picky, but I just want to sort of start to wrap myself around bigger things.
Yes. You start with a blanket, actually a pillow. You get a blanket, and a house. Right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, let's go bigger.
Yeah, bigger the better.
So I want to end on that note. Thank you for tuning in. As you know, the AMPM podcast, we always have conversations, really interesting conversations with trailblazers like Zipeng. So Zipeng, thank you.
Well, thank you
and
for
thank
having
you for
me.
having me in your beautiful home.
Of course. Thank you for agreeing to coming over here, because I am such a homebody. If I can not leave this house, I feel like I'm making the most out of the investment that I've put in here.
Oh yeah. And this is the perfect spot. It's just like the right nook, the right lights, and you make our job much easier.
Yeah, it's funny because I actually call this the gossip nook.
Well, we just spent like 2 hours gossiping,
Yeah,
so
basically.
That's perfect.
It's perfect.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you next time.